The massive space station hung in the dark like a giant metal flower. Ships from across the galaxy docked at its many arms, bringing representatives from worlds that most humans had never heard of. The station orbited Kepler Prime, a quiet world that served as neutral ground for the Galactic Council meetings. Inside the main assembly hall, chaos ruled the day. Hundreds of alien beings filled the chamber, their voices creating a symphony of panic and desperation. Some looked like walking crystals that caught the light and threw rainbows across the walls. Others resembled giant squids with too many eyes floating in tanks of blue liquid. A few species looked almost human, but with skin that shifted colors based on their emotions. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Zethkar, his crystal body reflecting the holographic displays that showed the war's progress. The images were not good. Red markers spread across the galaxy map like a disease, each one representing a star system that had fallen to the enemy. The Void Reapers had been unstoppable for 3 years now, and the red was growing faster each day. Admiral Caney sat quietly in the human section, watching the alien commanders report their losses. His weathered face showed no emotion as he listened to numbers that would break most people's hearts. The Xanthari warriors spoke of losing entire battle groups in single engagements. Their proud warrior culture meant nothing to machines that felt no fear and showed no mercy. The aquatic Nereid Empire representative floated in her water tank, her tentacles moving in patterns that showed deep sorrow. She described how the Reapers had boiled away entire oceans, turning water worlds into barren rocks. Her people had ruled the seas of 100 planets, but the Reapers cared nothing for water or land. Even the mighty Corvan hegemony admitted defeat. Their energy weapons were the finest in the galaxy, capable of cracking planets in half, but the Reapers adapted to every attack. What worked once never worked twice against these mechanical nightmares. Council leader Vexthera called for order, her ancient voice carrying the weight of centuries. Her species had watched civilizations rise and fall for millions of years, but she had never seen anything like the Reapers. They consumed everything organic, turning living matter into fuel for their endless war machine. Reports came in as the meeting continued. 3 more star systems had fallen in the past day alone. The Reapers moved like a plague across space, leaving only empty worlds behind them. Their black ships blotted out stars as they passed, and no force in the galaxy seemed able to stop them. Some representatives suggested fleeing to another galaxy. The journey would take thousands of years, but at least some would survive. Others wanted to try negotiating with the Reapers, though no one had ever managed to communicate with them. The machines simply attacked anything organic they found. The debate grew more heated as the hours passed. Voices rose in dozens of languages, creating a wall of sound that echoed through the chamber. Fear drove them all now, the fear of extinction that united species who had been enemies for centuries. Admiral Caney stood up slowly, his movement causing nearby aliens to turn and look. Humans were still newcomers to galactic politics, barely 200 years since their first contact with alien life. Most species considered them primitive barbarians who had stumbled into space travel through luck rather than wisdom. His voice cut through the chaos like a knife through silk. He spoke in clear, simple words that the translation systems could handle easily. Earth offered to help, he said. Humanity would send assistance to fight the Reapers. The reaction was immediate. Laughter erupted from several sections of the chamber. The crystal beings chimed in harmony, their sound patterns showing amusement mixed with disbelief. How could humans possibly help when the combined fleets of 47 civilizations had failed? Caney waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. Earth would send 1 ship, he announced. The UES Defiance would depart within 24 hours to engage the Reaper forces. Silence fell like a hammer blow. 1 ship. The humans were offering to send 1 ship against an enemy that had destroyed thousands of vessels from species far more advanced than Earth. The laughter returned, but this time it carried a bitter edge. Some representatives shouted angry words about human arrogance. Others simply shook their heads in dismay at such foolishness. A few looked genuinely sad, as if watching children march off to certain death. Ambassador Zethkar's crystal form flickered with colors that showed confusion and concern. He spoke directly to Caney, his voice carrying across the chamber through speakers embedded in the walls. The Altarian Federation had lost over 300 ships in the past month alone. What could 1 human vessel possibly accomplish? Caney's response was simple and direct. Humans had a different approach to warfare, he explained. They would see what could be done. More protests erupted from the assembly. The Zenthari war chief stood and spoke of honor, saying that brave death served no purpose against an enemy that felt nothing. The Corvan admiral displayed tactical data showing how quickly Reaper forces adapted to new weapons. Even the peaceful Draxi, who avoided conflict whenever possible, warned that sacrificing human lives would accomplish nothing. But Caney just nodded politely to each speaker. He thanked them for their concern and assured them that humanity understood the risks. The UES Defiance would still depart as scheduled. As he prepared to leave the chamber, whispers followed him like shadows. Some aliens spoke of human stupidity and the tragedy of their coming destruction. Others wondered if humans had secret weapons they were not sharing. A few simply shook their heads at the waste of life. The Galactic Council meeting continued after the human delegation left, but the mood had changed. The desperate energy from earlier had been replaced by a kind of numb acceptance. If the most warlike species they knew couldn't make a difference, then perhaps nothing could. Outside the assembly hall, alien reporters tried to interview Caney about humanity's decision. He answered their questions with the same calm certainty he had shown inside. Yes, Earth was sending only one ship. No, they did not expect support from other species. Yes, they understood the odds against them. The last question came from a young Altarian journalist whose crystal form pulsed with curiosity. She asked why humans were willing to throw away lives in a futile gesture against impossible odds. Caney paused for a moment, considering his words carefully. Then he smiled, an expression that looked strange to beings who had never seen human faces before. Because someone had to try, he said simply, and humans had always been good at doing things that others called impossible. As the human delegation walked away, their footsteps echoing in the metal corridors, the alien reporters watched them go. None of them expected to see these humans alive again. The UES Defiance floated in Earth's orbital shipyard like a sleeping giant made of metal and fury. Unlike the smooth curves and artistic designs that alien species preferred for their ships, the Defiance looked like it had been built by people who cared more about function than beauty. Her hull stretched nearly 2 kilometers from front to back, covered in scars and dents from battles with pirates and raiders across human space. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the corridors of his ship, checking on the final preparations before departure. His weathered face told stories of fights in the asteroid belt and wars around distant colonies. Morrison had been fighting since he was 18 years old, and now at 45 he commanded the most dangerous ship in Earth's fleet. The corridors buzzed with activity as 800 crew members prepared for what everyone knew would be their last mission. Engineers checked weapons systems that most aliens would call primitive. Gunners calibrated targeting computers for ranges that would challenge the best sensors in known space. Marines cleaned rifles and checked armor, preparing for boarding actions that might never come. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Rodriguez met Morrison in the tactical center, her tablet filled with data about their unusual cargo. Deep in the ship's most heavily protected compartment sat something that Earth had been working on for decades. Project Prometheus had cost more money than most planets made in a year, and only a dozen people in the entire human government knew what it really did. Rodriguez explained the weapon's basic principles to Morrison, though neither of them fully understood the science involved. Earth's smartest people had spent 20 years building something that pushed the very limits of what physics would allow. While other species looked for elegant solutions to complex problems, humans had asked a different question entirely. Chief Engineer Danny O'Brien joined them, his hands still dirty from working on the ship's power systems. The Defiance ran on technology that other species considered impossible and insane. Controlled antimatter reactions provided more energy than most stars, all channeled through systems that would terrify any sane engineer. But O'Brien was not entirely sane, which made him perfect for maintaining human military equipment. The power requirements for Project Prometheus were staggering. The weapon needed more energy in a single firing than most planets used in a year. O'Brien had rebuilt the ship's entire power grid 3 times to handle the load, and he still was not completely sure it would work. But that had never stopped humans before. Dr. Patricia Kane arrived carrying files full of intelligence about the Void Reapers. As the ship's science officer, she had studied the enemy for months, looking for weaknesses that other species had missed. The Reapers appeared to be completely logical machines that followed predictable patterns in everything they did. Their ships moved in perfect mathematical formations. Their tactics followed algorithms that could be calculated in advance, and their adaptation to new weapons happened in stages that smart computers could predict. Every alien species had tried to exploit these patterns, but the Reapers always adapted faster than their enemies could take advantage. Kane believed that human chaos theory might hold the key to victory. While alien civilizations sought order and predictable outcomes, humans embraced randomness and uncertainty. The Reapers were designed to counter logical threats, but they had never faced an enemy that made illogical decisions on purpose. Morrison reviewed the mission parameters one final time. The Defiance would travel to the Corvin system, where Reaper forces were currently destroying everything in sight. Intelligence suggested that over 300 enemy ships were operating in the area, systematically harvesting resources and hunting down refugee vessels. The journey would take 2 weeks through hyperspace, 2 weeks for the crew to finalize their impossible plan. Morrison had served on many ships during his career, but none had carried a crew quite like this one. Every person aboard the Defiance had volunteered for what Earth's military leadership privately called a suicide mission. Rodriguez pulled up tactical displays showing Reaper ship configurations. The enemy vessels were marvels of engineering efficiency, each one perfectly designed for its specific role in the fleet. Command ships coordinated attacks with mathematical precision. Harvester ships consumed organic matter and converted it to fuel. Destroyer ships eliminated threats with weapons that adapted to any defense, but perfection might be their weakness. The Reapers were so focused on efficiency that they could not conceive of enemies who deliberately chose inefficient solutions. Human military doctrine was built around the idea that if something was worth shooting, it was worth shooting with far more force than necessary. O'Brien explained the ship's defensive systems to the assembled officers. The Defiance carried armor thick enough to stop weapons that could crack moons. Her shields drew power from reactors that aliens would consider dangerously unstable. Her point defense systems could track and destroy thousands of incoming missiles simultaneously. None of it would matter against Reaper weapons, but that was not the point. The ship was not designed to survive a prolonged engagement with the enemy. She was designed to deliver Project Prometheus to the target area and fire it once before being destroyed. If they were very lucky, the crew might have time to escape in life pods before the ship exploded. Kane shared her analysis of Reaper behavioral patterns with the tactical team. The enemy adapted to threats in a specific sequence that followed computer programming rather than creative thinking. They would scan the Defiance, analyze her weapons and defenses, then adjust their own systems to counter the perceived threat level. This process took approximately 15 minutes for a single ship encounter. During that time, the Reapers would fight using standard protocols while their adaptation algorithms processed the new data. Those 15 minutes would be the only window the humans had to deploy their secret weapon. Morrison called for a final crew meeting in the main hangar bay. 800 people gathered to hear their captain's last words before departure. He spoke simply and directly, the way humans preferred their military speeches. They were heading into a battle that no one expected them to survive, against an enemy that had never been defeated, but they were not going to die for nothing. Earth had given them a weapon that might change the course of the war, and they would deliver it no matter the cost. The galaxy had laughed at humanity's offer of help, but they would not be laughing much longer. As the Defiance undocked from Earth's shipyard, no crowds gathered to cheer her departure. No bands played patriotic songs or politicians made inspiring speeches. The ship simply slipped away from Earth like a shadow, carrying her crew toward what everyone believed would be certain death. The journey to Corvin space would give them time to prepare for humanity's debut on the galactic stage. When they arrived, the galaxy would learn why humans had never lost a war they really wanted to win. The Corvin system burned like a funeral pyre in the darkness of space. What had once been home to 6 thriving worlds and billions of people now looked like a cosmic graveyard. Debris from destroyed ships drifted between the planets like metal snow, while massive black vessels moved through the wreckage with cold purpose. The UES Defiance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the battlefield, her sensors immediately picking up the scope of the destruction. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge, watching the tactical displays fill with red markers that represented Reaper ships. 367 enemy vessels moved through the system in perfect geometric patterns. each one following its programmed role with mechanical precision. The Reaper fleet looked like a swarm of metal insects feeding on a corpse. Massive harvester ships, each one larger than Earth's biggest space stations, consumed the remains of destroyed worlds. They broke down everything organic into base materials, feeding the endless hunger of their war machine. Smaller destroyer ships patrolled the outer edges of the system, hunting down refugee vessels that tried to escape. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez studied the enemy formations from her position at the tactical console. The Reapers moved with the kind of mathematical precision that made alien military commanders weep with envy. Every ship maintained exact distances from its neighbors. Every movement followed calculated patterns that maximized efficiency while minimizing risk. At the center of the formation sat the command ship, a nightmare of black metal and energy conduits that stretched 10 kilometers from end to end. Intelligence reports said that destroying the command ship would disrupt the entire Reaper network, though new command protocols usually established themselves within hours. Most species had tried this approach and failed, losing hundreds of ships in futile attacks against the heavily defended vessel. Chief Engineer O'Brien monitored the power systems from his station deep in the ship's engine room. Project Prometheus was drawing energy at rates that would have been impossible for any other human vessel. The antimatter reactors ran at temperatures that could melt planets, all carefully controlled by systems that most engineers would consider insanely dangerous. Dr. Kane analyzed the Reaper behavioral patterns as the Defiance approached the battle zone. The enemy ships responded exactly as her research had predicted, scanning the human vessel and beginning their standard threat assessment protocols. They cataloged the ship's weapons, measured her defensive capabilities, and started transmitting this data throughout their network. The process was fascinating to watch from a scientific perspective. Every Reaper ship in the system received detailed information about human technology within minutes, allowing them to adjust their shields and weapons to counter the perceived threat. This adaptation ability had made them nearly invincible against conventional attacks. Morrison ordered the ship to broadcast human identification codes as they entered the system. Several surviving Corvan defense ships detected the transmission and tried to warn the humans away. Admiral Tekvar, commanding the few remaining vessels of the once mighty Corvan fleet, sent urgent messages describing the futility of attacking the Reapers with a single ship. The human captain politely acknowledged the warnings and informed the Corvan commander that they had business to conduct. This response confused the aliens, who could not understand why humans would deliberately fly toward certain death. From their perspective, the Defiance was committing an act of spectacular suicide. The first Reaper ships to detect the approaching human vessel responded with their standard protocols. They performed detailed scans of the Defiance, analyzing every weapon system and defensive component. The data flowed through their network like water through pipes, reaching every ship in the fleet within minutes. This was exactly what Morrison had been counting on. The Reapers were so focused on cataloging threats that they never considered the possibility of deliberate misdirection. They scanned human weapons and found railguns, particle beams, and fusion missiles that other species had used for centuries. Nothing special, nothing that required immediate attention. Rodriguez opened fire with the ship's conventional weapons, targeting the nearest Reaper destroyers with everything the aliens would expect to see. The human railguns hurled metal slugs at incredible velocities, while particle beams carved bright lines across space. Fusion missiles streaked toward their targets, each one carrying enough explosive power to level cities. The Reaper ships responded efficiently, their adaptive shields easily handling weapons technology they had encountered countless times before. The slugs bounced off energy barriers that had learned to deflect kinetic attacks. The particle beams dispersed harmlessly against shields that had adapted to similar weapons. The missiles exploded uselessly against defenses that had been specifically calibrated to counter human military technology. To outside observers, it appeared that the human ship was conducting a futile last stand against superior enemies. Her weapons seemed primitive compared to the advanced technology that other species had used against the Reapers. The aliens watching from their crippled ships felt a mixture of admiration and pity for the brave humans, who were about to die for nothing. The Reapers quickly categorized the human threat level and assigned minimal resources to deal with this single irritating vessel. Most of their attention remained focused on harvesting operations and hunting down the few surviving refugee ships. From their mechanical perspective, the humans represented nothing more than a minor distraction that could be eliminated when convenient. O'Brien watched his power readings climb toward levels that would frighten any sane engineer. The antimatter reactors were producing energy outputs equivalent to small stars, all of it flowing into capacitors the size of city blocks. Warning lights flashed throughout the ship as the crew prepared for what they all knew would be their one chance at victory. Kane monitored the Reaper adaptation process with scientific fascination. The enemy ships had completed their analysis of human technology and adjusted their defenses accordingly. They now considered the Defiance to be a minor threat that could be destroyed with minimal effort when their primary objectives were complete. This proved to be a fatal miscalculation. Morrison gave the order that his crew had been waiting to hear since leaving Earth. Project Prometheus was about to show the galaxy what humans really thought about impossible odds and superior enemies. The weapon system that had cost more than most planets were worth was finally ready to demonstrate why Earth had sent only one ship to fight an entire fleet. The Reapers continued their harvesting operations, confident that their adaptation protocols had neutralized any threat the primitive human vessel might pose. They had faced thousands of different weapon types over the years, and nothing had ever surprised them enough to cause real concern. They were about to learn that humans had a very different definition of what constituted a weapon. Captain Morrison gave the order his crew had been waiting for since leaving Earth. His voice carried across the bridge with calm certainty as he spoke two simple words that would change the course of galactic history. Activate Prometheus. Deep within the Defiance's cargo bay, Project Prometheus came online with a sound like thunder, trapped in a metal box. The weapon system represented decades of human engineering, focused on a single principle that other species would consider insane. If something was worth shooting, humans believed it was worth shooting with overwhelming force that ignored conventional limitations. Chief Engineer O'Brien monitored power levels that would have terrified most civilizations into shutting down their equipment immediately. The antimatter reactors channeled energy outputs equivalent to small stars, all focused into capacitors the size of city blocks. These massive storage units then fed power into humanity's greatest achievement, a gravitational pulse generator that could create localized distortions in space and time itself. The weapon did not fire projectiles or energy beams like conventional systems. Instead, it weaponized gravity, the fundamental force that held the universe together. While other species had spent centuries learning to work within the laws of physics, humans had characteristically chosen to rewrite those laws when they became inconvenient. Warning lights flashed throughout the ship as the crew experienced the controlled chaos that defined human military engineering. The Defiance shook like a building in an earthquake, as massive amounts of energy flowed through systems that most engineers would never have dared to build. But the ship held together, her human designers having built her strong enough to survive forces that would tear apart vessels from more cautious civilizations. The first gravitational pulse erupted from the Defiance with no visible effect that outside observers could detect. Space appeared unchanged. Stars continued to shine in their familiar patterns, and the Reaper fleet maintained its perfect formations. For several seconds, nothing seemed to happen as the pulse raced outward at faster than light speeds. Then, reality reasserted itself with devastating consequences. The pulse propagated through space like a wave of invisible destruction, creating a field of gravitational distortion that affected everything within a light-year radius. Reaper ships found their carefully calculated formations disrupted as artificial gravity wells appeared throughout their fleet. Their perfectly coordinated movements became impossible as space itself became unstable around them. Dr. Kane monitored the weapon's effects with scientific fascination that bordered on madness. The Prometheus system exploited a theoretical weakness in the universe itself, the fact that reality depended on consistent gravitational fields to maintain the relationships between matter and energy. By disrupting these fields in carefully calculated patterns, humans had created a weapon that ignored conventional defenses entirely, but this was merely the opening move in humanity's plan. The second pulse, fired exactly 12 seconds after the first, created an interference pattern with the initial distortion. Where the two gravitational waves intersected, Space and time experienced localized collapse that affected the fundamental forces holding matter together. Reaper vessels caught in these zones did not explode or burn in any way that alien observers would recognize. They simply ceased to exist. The Reaper command ship, along with 47 other vessels, vanished in the first wave of intersecting gravitational distortions. Their adaptive shields and energy barriers proved useless against an attack that operated on the level of fundamental physics rather than conventional weapons technology. The massive 10-kilometer construct that had coordinated the entire fleet disappeared as if it had never existed at all. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez coordinated the second phase of the attack while the surviving Reaper forces attempted to analyze and counter this new threat. Their algorithms struggled to comprehend a weapon that attacked the nature of existence itself, rather than simply trying to destroy ships through conventional means. Nothing in their programming had prepared them for enemies who would deliberately destabilize space and time as a tactical option. The Defiance launched a spread of specialized torpedoes, each one containing a miniaturized gravitational pulse generator that had cost more to build than most planets produced in a decade. These weapons did not target individual ships the way conventional missiles would. Instead, they targeted the mathematical relationships that allowed the Reaper fleet to function as a coordinated entity. As gravitational distortions cascaded through the enemy formation, their perfect coordination collapsed into chaos that no computer program could resolve. Ships designed to operate as components of a larger organism suddenly found themselves isolated and confused. Without their collective intelligence network, individual Reaper vessels reverted to basic programming that left them vulnerable to conventional attack. The surviving ships of the Corvan Defense Fleet watched in stunned silence as humanity's single warship systematically dismantled an enemy that had seemed utterly invincible. Admiral Thekvar found himself unable to speak as he witnessed tactical displays showing Reaper vessels simply disappearing from his sensors. His military training had not prepared him for weapons that could erase matter from existence. Morrison ordered the final phase of the attack, as confused Reaper ships drifted through space like broken toys. The third gravitational pulse was designed not to destroy the remaining enemies, but to disrupt their adaptation protocols permanently. Human scientists had discovered that the Reaper's ability to counter new weapons depended on stable quantum fields that could be permanently damaged by the right kind of gravitational interference. The pulse swept through the scattered Reaper forces like an invisible storm, scrambling their adaptation algorithms beyond any hope of recovery. Ships that had survived millions of battles against conventional weapons found themselves unable to adjust their defenses or coordinate their attacks. They became sitting targets for the few remaining Corvan vessels, who destroyed them with weapons that should have been completely ineffective. In less than an hour, the UES Defiance had reduced the Reaper fleet from 367 vessels to scattered debris and confused stragglers. The mechanical entities that had consumed entire star systems were reduced to helpless scrap metal drifting through space. The survivors attempted to retreat, but their damaged navigation system sent them fleeing in random directions. O'Brien monitored the aftermath of Project Prometheus with grim satisfaction. The weapon had performed exactly as designed, though the power requirements had pushed even human engineering to its absolute limits. The antimatter reactors were running dangerously hot, and several major systems would need complete replacement before the ship could fight again. But they had proven that the Reapers could be defeated. More importantly, they had shown the galaxy that humans approached warfare with a level of creative insanity that no other species had ever imagined possible. The laws of physics were not sacred principles to be respected, but tools to be used in whatever way served humanity's purposes. As news of the victory spread across the galaxy, alien civilizations began to understand what they had unleashed when they laughed at Earth's offer of help. 3 months after the Battle of Corvan, the Galactic Council chambers looked completely different from the desperate gathering that had watched humanity volunteer for what everyone believed was certain death. Where panic and fear had once ruled, now there was cautious hope mixed with something that made many species uncomfortable. The same beings who had laughed at Earth's offer of help now spoke in whispers about the species that had casually broken the laws of physics. Admiral Caney stood before the assembly once again, but this time every eye in the chamber focused on him with intense attention. Representatives who had dismissed humans as primitive barbarians now hung on every word from Earth's military commander. The statistics flowing across the holographic displays told a story that most aliens still found hard to believe. In 3 months, humanity had eliminated Reaper presence from 47 star systems, using only 12 warships. The mechanical horrors that had consumed entire civilizations were retreating for the first time since the war began. Reaper fleets that had seemed unstoppable were now avoiding systems where human ships had been reported, apparently unable to adapt to weapons that attacked the nature of reality itself. Ambassador Zethkar of the Gyre Altarian Federation stood and formally requested technological sharing agreements with Earth. His crystal body flickered with colors that showed genuine humility as he acknowledged that his people's understanding of physics had been fundamentally incomplete. The same beings who had mastered energy manipulation beyond human comprehension were now asking to learn from a species they had considered backwards. Similar requests arrived from dozens of other civilizations. The Xanthari warrior culture wanted to understand how humans developed such devastating combat capabilities. The aquatic Nereid Empire offered to share their ocean worlds in exchange for gravitational pulse technology. Even the ancient Draxi, who had avoided warfare for millions of years, quietly inquired about defensive applications of human reality manipulation systems. Admiral Morrison, promoted after his role in the first Reaper defeat, addressed the Council about humanity's approach to warfare. He explained that humans succeeded where others failed, precisely because they refused to accept limitations that other species considered absolute. While alien civilizations sought to work within the laws of physics, humans characteristically chose to rewrite those laws when it became convenient. The presentation included detailed analysis of human military philosophy, though Morrison was careful not to reveal too many secrets. Where other species developed elegant solutions to complex problems, humans embraced complexity and found ways to make it work through sheer, stubborn determination. Their weapons technology did not represent superior understanding of the universe, but rather a willingness to build devices that sane species would consider impossibly dangerous. Dr. Kane shared carefully edited information about Project Prometheus, revealing just enough to demonstrate human capabilities while maintaining crucial operational secrets. The gravitational pulse technology represented only one application of humanity's theoretical physics research. Earth scientists had been developing reality manipulation systems for decades, viewing the fundamental forces of the universe as engineering challenges rather than immutable laws. The technology was not magic, Kane explained to the fascinated alien scientists. It was simply the result of asking different questions than other species asked. While most civilizations wondered how to work within the constraints of physics, humans wondered what would happen if they ignored those constraints entirely. The answer had been Project Prometheus and similar weapons that treated space and time as raw materials to be shaped by human will. Council leader Vexthera formally acknowledged Earth as the primary military authority in the war against the Void Reapers. The ancient being species had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations over millions of years, but none had demonstrated humanity's particular combination of brilliance and terrifying pragmatism. She announced that all military operations against the Reapers would now be coordinated through human command structure. The decision sparked protests from several species who had been fighting the Reapers for years before humanity even knew they existed. The Corvan hegemony argued that their energy weapons technology was still superior to human systems in most applications. The Xanthari claimed that their warrior traditions gave them better understanding of combat tactics than any other species. Morrison addressed these concerns with the patience of someone who had dealt with difficult allies before. Human command authority was not about superiority in all areas, he explained. It was about the simple fact that human weapons were the only ones that actually worked against the Reapers. Other species were welcome to contribute their expertise, but ultimate tactical decisions would rest with Earth's military commanders. The final presentation came from Captain Rodriguez, who had been promoted to lead the new Combined Fleet Operations Center. She displayed tactical analysis showing how human gravitational pulse weapons could be integrated with alien technology to create even more effective combat systems. The key was not replacing alien weapons entirely, but using human reality manipulation to enhance their capabilities beyond normal limits. Several alien species had already begun retrofitting their ships with human-designed power systems capable of supporting gravitational pulse generators. The weapons were still too chaotic and unpredictable for most alien crews to operate safely, which meant that human technicians had to be stationed aboard Allied vessels. This arrangement made some species uncomfortable, but the alternative was facing the Reapers with conventional weapons that had already proven useless. The meeting concluded with plans for the final assault on the Reaper homeworld in the galactic core. Intelligence suggested that the mechanical entities originated from a massive artificial construct that had been consuming star systems for millennia. The planet-sized installation bristled with defenses that had repelled every previous attack, protected by shields and weapons that represented millions of years of technological advancement. Admiral Morrison announced that a combined fleet of human and alien vessels would depart within the week. Earth had provided gravitational pulse weapons to 12 Allied ships, though the technology required human crews to operate safely. The weapon systems were simply too chaotic and unpredictable for species that valued stability and predictable outcomes. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, many of them struggled to process what they had witnessed. Humanity had gone from galactic newcomers to the dominant military power in the space of 3 months. Their weapons had proven capable of destroying enemies that had seemed utterly invincible, and their casual attitude toward breaking fundamental laws of physics suggested that this was only the beginning, the final scene of the council. Session showed Admiral Caney speaking quietly with several alien commanders about logistics for the coming battle. His calm demeanor and practical approach to impossible challenges had become legendary among species that were only beginning to understand what humans were truly capable of accomplishing. Outside the council chambers, alien reporters tried to interview human personnel about their species' miraculous success against the Reapers. The answers they received were uniformly modest and practical. Humans had not saved the galaxy through superior wisdom or ancient knowledge, the interviewees explained. They had simply done what humans always did when faced with impossible problems. They had found a way to hit it really hard until it stopped being a problem.